Hey, everybody, this is Monica Karam, intuition and clarity coach. And I'm here today to talk to my friend Ahmad Abuljobain. And we're just going to have a conversation about his new book and just deep conversation and life in general. How are you, Ahmad?
Oh, great. Good
Thanks
morning.
for taking the time to talk to me and to have our coffee. Do you have your coffee there? Okay, so we are gonna have Ahmed's been my friend for like what, 20 years. We've been friends,
Something
maybe
like that,
more.
yeah. Yeah.
And Ahmed is married. He has a wonderful wife who's my friend too. And
We just celebrated 20th anniversary. So yes, it's been 20 years that we
wow,
know each other.
really. And remember, I met you when your wife just came to Dubai. We were living in Dubai,
Mhm,
and I think I was one of her first friends when she first
mhm.
came to Dubai. And we've been friends ever since. We've had kids, each one of us, and you have four boys,
Mhm.
which can't be an easy thing.
No, it's
No.
not.
And today we're going to be talking about your book. You wrote a book. What is the book called? Okay, Control, a children's guide to, what is
Money,
it?
power, and sex.
Okay, so yeah, that's what we all want to teach our kids. And what does that mean? Are we actually teaching our kids money, power, and
Power,
sex?
sex. Talking about gender relations. That was
Okay,
the
okay.
intention behind the title.
So I know since I've known you, you're a writer, you're like a mentor to a lot of people. And I know you've been writing for a long time, but what came up? Why did you decide that I need to write a book about children, power, sex, and money? Tell me the
So
story.
yeah, so we all contemplate the meaning of life, and I was living for a while alone. My family was in the Emirates, and I was in Saudi Arabia. I had been there in Saudi for a couple of years, and I'm not a party goer, so my evenings were spent in contemplation more often than not. And I would think about life in general, and I came to a conclusion that the meaning of life is all about control, hence the title of the book. It's all about how everybody wants to control everybody. Bosses want to control employees, employees want to control bosses, and that's why they complain. Men want to control women, women want to control men. So that was the inspiration behind it. And the other idea was being away from the family. If anything were to happen to me, how would they remember me? I didn't have an opportunity to tell them everything that I wanted to tell them. So I started thinking, what are the most important things that I wanted them to remember me by? And hence, I just started jotting them down and writing them down. And over time, they organized themselves into a book. And I decided to publish the book because I thought, if they're going to help my boys, maybe they'll help somebody else. And in fact, I've not only had positive feedback from the parents of teens, I've even had good feedback from young professionals that are just starting out, that have picked up on the book. There's a few of them who still reach out to me and communicate with me about the content there and ask for my thoughts and whatnot. And I try to help them the best I can.
That's fantastic. I mean, you sent me the book and I read it and I loved it. And I like the fact that you're directing it to your sons because a lot of us, and I know we're all empowering women now, and I am, pro empowering women, it's my thing. But I also think we need to empower boys and men and teach them how nobody teaches them how to be good dads, good husbands, good men in the world. And you're directing this more at boys, your boys, but really everybody's son.
Mhm.
And why boys? I know because of your sons, but why did you feel?
Well, I mean, so this is about the conversations that happen in life. And as I say, that whether or not people realize it, it's a desire to control. And the best control that you can exercise is self-control, for the simple reason that you will be in situations that you can't manage the outcomes. So the best that you can do is practice the control of the self, the ego. And that's why when I look at my boys, especially in the current environment, I have to be honest, I am old school. I am the guy that teaches his sons to open the door for a lady. I am the guy
That's
that,
why I like you so much. That's what I believe in.
and the challenge that they face is that, they will come across people, ladies who say, why are you opening the door for me? I can open it for myself. And I have to teach them how to deal with that situation and manage it, because that would be her right to feel that way, and they shouldn't feel insulted if that happens. So that's again part of the self-control. But that doesn't mean that I will change my perspective that that's what they need to do. I'll give you another example. I teach them when they're walking with a lady on the sidewalk that they need to walk on the outside. Now, people will say, that's silly. And part of those who say that it's silly know the origins of that practice. I don't know if any of your younger viewers will know this, but back in the day, especially in Europe, there weren't lavatories in the houses. So people would they would have the pots in the house. And when the pots would get full, there was no drainage system. So they would throw the sewage out of the window onto the street. So that's why, by the way, people back in the day had the top hats and they would be wearing the coats and whatnot, because there would be bits of what was thrown out falling on the sidewalks. Hence, the man should walk on the outside and the lady on the inside, so that if, God forbid, any of that dirt would fall on the man, not the lady. Okay. So this is, I tell the story because the idea is that you need to be a gentleman and not a misogynist.
Exactly. Or a chivalrous person.
Or a chivalrous
person. Are like, I don't know, little.
And that's why. I mean, I've got boys. I keep telling them I would have much preferred to have daughters, and I keep telling them I would easily sell them for getting a daughter. But
I'm sure they appreciate that, and I know you're joking. Okay, so a question: what is your definition of a father?
That's a good question. I think there's no one definition, for the simple reason that life comes in stages. So you have to be a father in stages. I can't deal with my kids are now ranging from 9 years old to 18 years old. So I can't deal with the 9-year-old the way I deal with the 18-year-old. My 18-year-old, he's got a license, he works, he's second year college, and my 9-year-old still wants to go to the park to play with the ball. So my definition of a father is somebody who understands how to pass on his vision to his children at stages, because as they get older, you are becoming an advisor. You are no longer an instructor. But as they're younger, you're an instructor. I mean, there's no two ways about it. When you're a 9-year-old is not somebody that you can say, here's what I think, go ahead and do what you like. There are certain rules, guidelines that you need to be able to give that 9-year-old, but in a way that allows him or her to feel confident in themselves. And that's the challenge, because there's no such thing as a perfect parent. And that's the problem with kids. Kids sometimes get all huffy and upset with the parent, thinking the child's perception is right and the parent is wrong, and they don't want to hear what the parent has to say, blanket, rather than the child trying to engage in a dialogue and understand the parent's point of view. So I don't know if that answers the question.
And vice versa, because the problem is sometimes as parents, we think that our way is the right way. And our kid has a different purpose, a life, a character, a personality that doesn't fit at all. Some really don't fit. But, how do you navigate that? Because what you want for your child doesn't work for that child.
Yeah.
And you can't put your vision of what you want in your child on them.
Yeah.
Right? Because every child has their vision. Like my kid could be a creative, let's say that. And I am like, I don't know, accountant, logic mind. and I'm trying to get this kid to conform. And that's one of the many of the biggest mistakes we make, because we know this,
Sure.
and that kid is not at all interested in this. How do we?
Well, this is the challenge. I mean, you're right. We know this, but the kid knows that, and that's the idea is that you need to try and find a middle ground. And one of the best examples I think that all parents are experiencing these days, especially with lockdown, is education. I mean, one of the most consistent conversations that I'm having with my kids is balance of time, because their perception of how they are addressing their education versus what they're doing on their leisure time, mostly on the PS4.
I know it well.
But I've seen parents really frustrated with the performance of their kids under lockdown, because in school they go and it's structured and they have to pay attention to the teacher. Here I walk in on some of my kids, and while the class is on, they're texting or they're doodling, and a lot of kids are having difficulty dealing with that because they do not have the maturity yet. Not all of them, some do, some don't, but many of them don't have the maturity yet to really make that decision. So you're right. You don't want to choke them, but at the same time, you can't say, "Oh, the kids will be kids," and let them, do what they want, because they're still in the process of figuring out how to balance their time. And I don't think you can ever say that there's one solution for all.
And each child is different, right? So you're going to what might work with your first child has no doesn't work at all with the second one. And each one needs their and on top of that, remember, now we're in a new society, a new world. At our time, okay, now we're around 20, 25,
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, but at our time we were connecting to people. We didn't have technology that was so powerful, and now everybody's texting. This connection with others is so missing.
Right.
Don't have that. They text.
Right.
If it doesn't work out, they say bye.
Right.
So they're not building really deep, meaningful relationships.
Right.
And that's become, this is what I'm working on, getting kids to go back to that, but it's becoming more and more obsolete. So kids are feeling a bit isolated.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. I mean, and one of the, we were talking earlier about this, one of the worst apps, but the most popular is TikTok.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed on this app is not only the content creators and what they're saying, but you look at the comments of what people are saying. These are mostly kids. They're mostly younger generation. And this application has given them permission to let the worst of themselves out. They lash out a lot, they critique a lot, they insult a lot, simply because it's easier to do on this app. And it goes down to, before, the older applications were Facebook and these, but people were also doing cyberbullying there, but it was more limited. But as this generation is going more and more technologically connected, you're absolutely right. There's a great challenge with getting kids to understand human connections.
Also their boundaries. Maybe we were to a different extreme in the older days, because what we did was we were people pleasers. Let's be clear. We were very, very worried about our reputations and what we said, and we had to filter 6 billion times before we said anything. But now kids are just, let's just say it as it is.
Yeah.
And the thing is, nobody's given them tools to know how to deal with their emotions.
Right.
I know for many years I didn't know what I would feel things, but I would think they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I can't feel angry, I can't feel sad, I can't feel frustrated. So I would be like, I'm very happy, and inside I wanted to strangle somebody because I didn't know how to express it.
Right.
And we're not given those tools. Those kids are not given the tools. So what they have to do is fit into that box.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a struggle. How do you deal with that with your kids, for example? Like, do they come to you?
Well, it's a challenge both for the kids and for for me. I mean, to be very honest, when I tell you I'm old school, I grew up in that environment, and I still have those beliefs. I mean, we were talking about men being in touch with their emotion and all that. I'm still off. I can't. I mean, I don't have that perception that I can be flowing and talking about my feelings. I mean, that just I
know, because we're brought up that a man should be a man. He has to be tough.
Yeah.
He has to toughen up.
Absolutely. And I mean, I encourage my boys to try and find a balance with that. I still believe that to be true. I still believe that a man, in order to be a provider or to be a protector or to be, again, for whoever wants to be provided for or protected, not imposing it, has to have.
It's a combination. Like,
right.
This is something that you and your wife agreed upon at
Exactly.
the beginning of your marriage, and this is what we're going to. It's like going into a job. This is my role. This is your role,
Exactly.
and this is how we're going to work as partners.
It has to be. Everything has to be mutually agreed upon. I mean, that's how we've been able to maintain things. I mean, we've had our ups and downs like any couple, and men are not the same as women, and women are not the same as men, and it's just part of the process is finding out where the common foundations are. And respecting the other foundations. And on respect, that's one of the things that I wanted to mention here. On the issue of control, there are 3 pillars, if you like, other than what the different chapters in the book that I think are fundamental to what I try to teach my boys and what I think helps the relationships moving forward. And it can take time to get to those 3 fundamentals. One of them is listening. Nobody listens anymore. And I've noticed this in our part of the world a lot, but even now, very much so in the West, most people, not everybody, but most people that I'm in conversations with are generally preparing their responses before the other person has completed saying what they have to say. So listening is a very challenging thing. The other thing is respect. Respecting boundaries, respecting each other. When I talk to my kids, they don't like what I say half the time, but I try to say what I have to say, respecting them as people, even if they don't agree with me. You'd have to talk to them to see if they see that. But that's what my intention is as I try, because you have to have respect. But that brings me to the third issue that one has to focus on, which is self-worth. So the first, listening and respect, is about the other and your relationship with the other. But the third is not breaking yourself down in order to make accommodations for the other. Because, we were talking about earlier the example of the men opening the doors, and if you meet somebody who doesn't want the door open for them. So I should know my self-worth. I should not take it personally if somebody attacks me for opening the door. But I should be just as willing to walk away from that person in that situation without getting all emotional about it, because that's that person's issue and perception and preference and whatnot. And knowing my self-worth is, I won't say, oh, I'll stop opening doors. It's saying that's a person that doesn't want the door open for them. If I see them again, I won't do it for them out of respect for their wishes. And so those 3 elements, I think, work together in order to help us find the self-control and deal with the world that wants to control us.
I like it. Yeah, what you mentioned, listening, that is a very, very difficult thing, because we all have agendas, right? So we're all sitting there thinking, okay, I get it. Oh, I remember what happened to me. I should tell that story while he's in the middle of telling his. And then also giving that, not knowing, because like, are we supposed to sit and listen to the whole story? And no one teaches us, like, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to go, yep, yeah, because sometimes it takes a long time and somebody's telling their story. So you don't know whether you're supposed to, like, these are taught things. You don't know whether you're supposed to put your hand on the thing and like, oh, I feel with you. It's tough.
Yeah.
Because how do you react if somebody's telling you really bad news? Do you sympathize? Maybe they don't want you to sympathize. Maybe they just want you to hear them.
That's a very valid point. That's one of the things in my book. It's a lesson I've told my boys more than once. When I was 16 years old, I was living in London.
Mhm.
I walked into a Europa. I don't know if they're still around, but there was a Europa, it's the equivalent of a 7-Eleven. And
Okay.
because I used to love Lucozade. It's like an
Yeah,
old energy drink. So the original one.
yeah,
I
yeah,
used
yeah.
to love that, and I used to get shepherd's pies from there. So they had
Mhm.
packaged shepherd's pies. So I got two of each of those because I was a teen, and I would devour them. When I walked out of the Europa, I was walking down the street. I still remember it was Sloane Street. It was a dark, rainy night. Those typical in the movies, you see through the rain, through the lamp and whatnot. So I was walking down and I see this huddled in the doorway, and I could see that it was a homeless lady. So I reached into my bag and I pulled out a Lucozade and a shepherd's pie, and I handed it to her, and she just started screaming at me. Who the hell asked you? Who the hell told you I wanted anything? And it just, I was just standing there in shock, and I listened because I was in shock. So she just railed on for at least 5 minutes at me. And at the end of it, she just huddled herself back up and ignored me. So I was just standing there, and then I put it in my bag, and I just sort of in a daze walked off. And I got home years later. It was something that I realized what I did at that point was about me wanting to feel good about myself, giving this to someone else. I had no idea what her background was, what her history was, what brought her to that point, how she felt about herself. She might have been a professor that, fell on hard times. I don't know, but it was about me and
You
my feeling.
assumed.
Yeah. And I made the assumption, and I just wanted to feel good by giving her something. But there's no right or wrong in that situation, but being able to have the wherewithal to react maturely in that situation, that's the big challenge. So, and that goes to sort of listening to yourself, understanding context before you reach judgment. And that's what a lot of people don't do, unfortunately.
And also, we don't hear, we don't see, because we're seeing from our experience and
Yeah.
our eyes and our view of the world. So how I was brought up and how what my vision of life so far is how I see the world.
Right.
Okay. But the person you're talking to is talking about something completely different. But
Mhm.
that's because for them, that's what makes sense, because their trajectory of their life is that, and they believe it, and that's their value. So for me or anyone, I'm just talking about, you know, I have to look at the other perspective,
Right.
through the lens of somebody else first,
Right.
because they have every right to feel that way, because that's the vision or the view of their life that they see.
Right.
So there's taking the time to hear other people's point of view, whether it's about upbringing of kids, whether it's
Hmm.
sex, whether it's religion, whether it's spirituality. Everybody has their view.
Right.
No one has a wrong or right view. It's their view. So
Right.
respecting that is so important, you know?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. It's not the topic of this conversation, but you bring up religion. That's part of the fundamental problem. You look at how many religious beliefs there are. Um, you're faced with a number of challenges because, you've got the main monotheistic faiths, and then you've got Buddhism and Hinduism, which are major world religions. But then you've got sort of, for lack of a better word, fringe belief systems. You've even got Satanism and whatnot. So you question, how do you deal with somebody who believes that? Because it's something different than what you have. And it comes down to respect. There's the saying that your freedom ends where mine begins, and that applies to all conversations. So I can have, it's like what's going on in America right now. I think the past 4 years in America have been the worst in the country's modern history. Not including the Civil War, but modern history. Um, Only by the size of it. There was racism, there was prejudice in the background, but for the way the conversation with technology these days, it's sad to see how unwilling people of different beliefs have become to listen to each other. You shouldn't be um, a Republican or a Democrat and vilified simply because that's what you identify with. But that's unfortunately how people want to impose their view on the other. And if you don't understand my view, that means there's something wrong with you. And we've got a long way to go still.
We've got a long way to go to stop also stereotyping people.
Yes.
Like we see someone who is, I don't know, an Arab. We're going to give you as an example, okay, an Arab Muslim man. Mm-hmm. And we have written down, okay, he's going to be this. Now we know what he treats his wife like. This is what he can't be that educated. Like I'm giving what people see. And oh my God, he's so fanatic. Oh my God, I won't be able to speak to him about all kinds of things. Like there's a stereotype. Yep. And oh my God, he speaks English. This is like, okay. So like, it's the same thing with a Black person, with a Lebanese woman. Like there's the amount of things I've heard about, different places where I've been and, oh, really? About myself. And the same thing, we've judged people who are different. Every one of us has a preconceived image of a culture, a personality, a color, a whatever. And unless we take the time to open that up and see the other person. Like I'll give you a story. When I was living in Dubai, mm-hmm. There was a friend, I can't call him a friend.
Acquaintance.
Okay, someone I met, okay? And he had just come from Lebanon and he was very Christian, very only that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think I've told the story many times, but I'm going to repeat it. Because his view of Islam and of Muslims and of Dubai was what we saw in the, they ride camels, they're not very, like that. And he was moving into a country that was 90-something% Muslim. And he had a preconceived vision and idea of what they were like. Mm-hmm. And he came to my house because he was friends with, anyway, let's not go there. Okay. So he was talking about how anti he was. Mm-hmm. And that this. And at the time, I said to him, you got it wrong. Mm-hmm. You got to open up. You got to see different points of view. And he thought I was crazy at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember making a point that he never comes to my house again, because I hated at the time anyone who was closed-minded in their views. Right. But then again, that was me judgmental also, because for me, you got to be open-minded. This is how you got to be. And mm-hmm. I didn't see his point of view, mm-hmm. because for him, this is all he knew. This is all he was taught, right? A few years later, I am in a place and he's there. Mm-hmm. So I'm like being polite and everything. And he comes up to me and he goes, Monica, I remember what you said to me, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you were right. At the time, I couldn't see it. And now some of my best friends, and I've opened up and I've lived here for so long. And I understand now how close-minded I was. But the thing is, if you've never been exposed to anything other than where you're at, mm-hmm. let's say you've only been exposed to people who are the same culture, same color, same everything. You've never seen anything outside. Mm-hmm. You're going to assume that they're danger.
Right.
Unless you try to look.
Well, I mean, I would take that, you're absolutely right. And I would take it a step further. It's an understanding that those preconceived notions are precisely what others want us to have at times. And this is about self-realization, that I don't want anybody to control my mind. I mean, I look at what's happening. I'm a half Iraqi. My mom's, God rest her soul, is Iraqi. I don't recall ever feeling the distinction between Sunni and Shia growing up, because I grew up in the UK. I lived abroad. There was a huge Iraqi community. In my family, there's a lot of intermarriage between those two parts of Islam. When for whatever reason, the politics happened and then the invasion happened, Saddam went, and then and the Americans came and installed a new sectarian government. in the past 15, 20 years, the increase, the exponential increase of sectarian division has been unprecedented in modern history of Iraq. And I don't think that's because that's always been there. I think that's partially because it's something that facilitates control. I've seen it also in Lebanon. You bring up the example of somebody coming out of Lebanon. Lebanon itself, inside Lebanon, is very sectarian because there are sectarian benefits that happen inside there. But you take somebody from Lebanon, put them anywhere in the world, and they are amongst the most innovative, creative, industrious, productive people in any geography. So that tells you something. That tells you that there's a system there that benefits from this self-perception that I'm right and the other is incorrect. And that's something that we are not maybe going to change the world, but if each of us starts within the environment that we're in, working on that and expressing that mutual respect and letting people know that you don't need to believe something negative. I mean, there's one lady that I went to a dinner once when I was in Dubai. They had just come over from the States, and her husband was the CEO of an oil company, and it was at the American Business Council, and she was sat next to me the whole evening, and we had a nice conversation. At the end of the conversation, she turned around to me, she said, in her Texan drawl, "You're such a nice person. It's a shame you're going to hell." And I was like, "What?" I appreciated the honesty, and I'm like, "Why did you say that?" And she started proceeding, telling me how I needed to be saved, and that Jesus died for me on the cross and all that. And I respected that. We had the conversation, but I was taken aback by the perception. And again, it's a belief system, and that's fine. I mean, you can believe that. But what I try to tell people when we go to the religious side of things is whatever it is you believe, you must believe that whoever made you is the one that's going to judge you and not the person that you're talking to. So you can have all the conversations you want, but at the end of the day, when I die and I go and I face my maker is not going to be asking me what did X, Y, and Z tell me or think about me. He's going to ask me what I did and what I thought and all that stuff. So that's what I try to teach my boys.
Yeah, and then what you were saying, it's about your community. But the first change, as Michael Jackson says, is to take a look at the man in the mirror first.
Right.
Because it is the work you do on yourself first.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of the work I've done is about changing my beliefs, taking every belief that I've been taught all my life, right, and saying, does this actually work for me?
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, and it's not a journey, it's not an easy journey, let's be clear.
Speaking about that and the spirituality of it, when you think about it, all of the faiths have a form of an expression that their prophet, messenger, deity, whatever, has told them, but so few people keep that in mind. I mean, in the Bible, there is a verse that says, "Let him without sin cast the first stone." In our traditions, there's a saying of the prophet that summarized, how can you see when you have a speck of dust in your eye? So, you're absolutely right. You've got to sit there and look at yourself first. And, are you that perfect a person to be making judgments about others?
And then catch yourself when you're judgmental. There's a wound inside of you that you haven't healed. So if I'm judging you, look at me first. Why am I judging you? There's something going on. So it is really about us, and you teaching your kids that. It's giving, or whatever we do with our children, with the people we connect with, it's just our inside coming out, it's a difficult journey.
Oh yeah. And it's one that's an ongoing one. I mean, my boys are still growing. I like to think that I've given them some basics, but who knows what they'll experience, what mistakes they'll make, how they'll handle those mistakes. But the journey that I found is, I'm still on it. I mean, I'm only half a century old now. So you still deal with your demons for all your life. I mean, it's not like, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're that perfect person. And you look at people who are empathetic, they are generally the ones who struggle the most. You know, one of the people that really, it broke my heart when I learned about it, and it's always on my mind, even though it's been many years, was Robin Williams when he
Oh,
committed
he
suicide.
was
When
the
you think
best.
about somebody like that, who was so intuitive and so, it brought so much joy to so many people, and had basically made it. I mean, you know, money wasn't an issue for this guy, and still he had those thoughts, he still had those feelings, and it's sad that he reached that point where he couldn't do it anymore, he couldn't handle it anymore, and he had to take that step. And so I think no matter where you reach in your journey, and you believe that you're, in control of yourself and in control of the others, always being conscious of yourself and of others, and giving yourself the space, giving yourself the time. And if you start having those dark thoughts and, you know, you're unsure, whatever, just switch off, walk away, go somewhere else. Just don't allow yourself to reach that point, and go back and find your, what did you call it? Your center,
Their
your middle.
center. And that's it, because we all have dark thoughts, and we all have, it depends on the day, and it's sitting with ourselves and connecting to something. Like Robin Williams, let's give an example. He gave everything to everybody else. He did everything in his power to make others happy.
Right.
But maybe, which is what a lot of us do who are caregivers or who give to everybody else, we forget to fill our own tanks.
Right.
So he was struggling with his demons, but he was like, you know what? I'm going to go help somebody else. And always helping somebody else does help you.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you've escaped again from
Right.
yourself. And what do they say? There's a saying, wherever you are, you're still there. So you can
Yeah.
travel to, I don't know, to Cuba and have a nice 1 week
Absolutely.
vacation, but you're not going to get away from yourself.
Right.
So the first journey is like inwards.
Yeah. And it's mutual. I mean, we were talking earlier about the purpose here, and, you know, about understanding yourself, but understanding others. And you were telling me a lot of your viewers have perceptions of the male role in the family and in the relationships and whatnot. And the things that I would say is there's a mutuality there. You know, what if I were to look at myself and the challenges that my wife and I have had.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
Both
about
of
your
us,
marriage. Yeah.
both of us, my analysis of it is that both of us have an intrinsic need to be understood. And I think that we are still on that journey. And I think that's why you have a lot of problems in couples. That's why you have a lot of division. That's why you have a lot of blame laying, because there's a difficulty understanding how to understand. And you know, more often than not, we've walked away from debates or arguments or whatnot without a resolution, simply because we haven't reached that point where we're able to respect the other's perspective and understand it while respecting our own. And that's a very complicated, I mean, that's more difficult than raising kids.
Oh my God, yeah. Because if you're not connected and you're not on the same page, I know it from previous experience, that if two people are not working as a team with their strengths and weaknesses. So if, let's say, I have a weakness here, the other person might have that strength, and together you work, but it takes letting go of your ego, letting go, being very aware, self-aware of, yes, I have a strength here, I'm good, but this point I'm gonna try, but take over for me. It's a dance, right? The relationship is a dance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that there's no right or wrong in it. It's just being able to reach conclusions with serenity, because you might reach a conclusion that relationship is not working. And you just have to be able to be respectful enough of each other to say, well, let's walk away and maintain ties. Because, you know, sometimes I see people have very ugly separations, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, it's very simple. You know, you reach a point where, okay, we've come to the conclusion that we're not going to be seeing eye to eye. Well, okay, let's walk away respectfully. And, you know, I look at my my own mother. she married 3 times. She's like beyond her time. She, for
He
the
was
older
cool.
generation, her first husband was Lebanese, and she divorced him. Her second husband,
Wow,
my
she was
father, is
cool at that time,
Palestinian.
huh?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And she married my father, who's Palestinian. She divorced him, and she married her third husband, the Egyptian, and she stayed with him. But she was a tough cookie with all three of them. And later in life, we talked about how, from her perspective, they were not sharing and they were not showing respect for her role and for her desires. But she also acknowledged that there were shortcomings on her part. And her ultimate conclusion was going back to the self and her spirituality. So she found herself in her faith, and that's what sort of helped her in her later years in life find peace. And I think that's what all of us need to find. We need to find, when you say that center, it's got to be, what is that spiritual center that you find comfortable for you as on your journey of understanding? Because I think the most important journey of understanding is your relationship with your maker.
Exactly.
I can't speak to atheists. I respect that there are people who don't believe that at all. I don't know. I can't, tell them what their spiritual journey is, but I'm sure that they have their own perspective. But again, it comes down to respecting the fact that they've reached that conclusion.
And on my personal journey, I mean, anyone who knows me knows that 7 years ago, okay, I'm Christian by whatever you want to call it, like birth and been taught, but I never had a spiritual practice.
Mhm.
And I can say that through my darker times, it is where I found it.
Right.
And for me, it's a spiritual path. It has no denomination anymore.
Mhm.
It is belief in, there's a relationship
Right.
between me and God, universe, whatever. I call it intuition. I call it my biggest cheerleader. But I can tell you this, from all that I've experienced and all the hardships and the darkest moments of my life, if I didn't have faith,
Mhm.
I have no idea how I would have gotten through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, it is a blind, something you can't see physically,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Right.
And for me, it's my core now.
Yeah.
I see it in everything. I like just the trees outside for me is God. Like anything is living in the moment and being connected. And when I'm not connected, the dark thoughts come back, the anger issues, the whatever, the disconnection with self.
Right.
And that's the center of motherhood, doing your own thing. It's getting back, and it's not always easy. Sometimes you're here and then something distracts you, and then coming back like a tree.
Yeah.
You've got to be centered. But
Yeah.
your mom was ahead of her time, and she saw that. The problem is a lot of people and a lot of us, we stay in things that might not have felt good. Or maybe two people were very good people, but not at all on the same page, same values, same whatever. But for society's reasons or for families or for whatever, we keep dragging it on.
Right.
Because
No, I mean, one of the worst that I've heard is we're doing it for the kids.
This is the worst thing, because you're teaching your kids to suck it up and be okay with not working. Now, okay, we don't want our kids to just leave relationships just because they had a small fight.
Right.
Like there's what do you call it?
Limits.
Levels. Like there's neither this nor that. But if something is really crossing your boundaries, day in, day out, then you have self-respect, self-worth. You got to make that decision. And it's not an easy decision.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, why are we reading your book, and where can we find the book? And how can we find you more and, find out more about what like, I'm sure you're going to be making more videos or talking to.
We talked about this, and I'm I'm on my journey trying to reach that point where I will be doing that on a more consistent basis. I mean, everything that I've done publicly has been very ad hoc and personal and just for my enjoyment. I mean, I have, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, but not on a regular, consistent basis, simply because it's for my enjoyment rather than to pass on. But it's something that you've advised me to look into, and I'll start thinking about
I put you under the
being
spotlight now.
more active on those platforms. But if you think about why read the book, there are things in that book that most people know but may not know how to communicate to people they care about. And from what I've discovered from my own children, sometimes I could say something, but they hear the exact same thing from someone else, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So, so that's another reason why you might want to see in there. And then there are things that preparatory for the kids that that they may not know. I mean, if you've got kids that are entering into the workforce, there are thoughts in there like, in the book I talk about you have to have a 30-day rule, especially if you have kids that or young adults working overseas. Whatever the market, there are places where you might not get paid your salary on time. And if you're starting a business, you might not get paid your invoice on time. And a lot of people are patient and they think, I'll just suck it up, talking about sucking it up, I'll suck it up and wait and see what happens. And, I'll try and encourage the other party to make that payment or whatnot. And what I've discovered is business is business, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur, and you should not let emotion get in the way. So, you wait for 30 days. After those 30 days, you should consult a lawyer. You should start looking at labor laws or local laws. You should not be saying, let me give this more time and more chance, because whoever has seen fit to delay your dues is not somebody or an entity that's respecting the contract between you and them.
That's a very interesting point.
So there are thoughts like that in the book. And the other thing is, in this book, it's not all just me, and what I think or whatever. What I try to do is bring in references to more qualified people for certain elements, and support some of the thoughts in there. One example is I talk about how you should consider segmenting your income, even if you're starting early. And so I reference Elizabeth Warren. She wrote a book with her daughter, Senator Elizabeth Warren, for those who don't know, in the States. So she wrote a book about finances, and she talks in it about what she suggests people segment their income into so that they have a nest egg at the end. So there are thoughts like that, again, that are not all my own. And I hope, with thoughts like that, again, it puts perspective for anybody's view of life. And like I said, it's not, okay, the title is about kids or children, but it's for anybody to experience. It's a fairly easy read. I think it's only about 80 pages long.
Life lessons. It's what somebody, a preteen or a young adult, or really like somebody, I don't know, going through a divorce, who's restarting her life, who maybe had been dependent all her life on somebody else, and now she's having to start over again, or he, or whatever the circumstances. These are like step-by-step lessons on what to do, because there's a stage from I'm a teen to now we throw them in the world, and nobody's given them a toolbox. Or nobody's given them a manual that says, you're gonna have to do your taxes. This is how it works.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is one of the things that they kind of do here in the States that they didn't do overseas. In high school, there are classes that are designed like shop, and that they have business ethics and entrepreneurship. I wish they had more of those overseas, but what they don't have here is exactly what you just mentioned. They should be teaching kids, this is your taxes, this is how you deal with taxes. That sort of stuff isn't taught, and it should be. So lessons like that, hopefully people will be able to get, but I don't go into that detail in the book.
But also there is sorry to interrupt you, there is that maybe this job doesn't fit me.
Yep.
Maybe my dad said I should be an accountant, but I hate numbers.
Right.
And your body is going into severe anxiety because you really hate going to this job every day.
Right. Absolutely. And that's why, and when you look at stuff like this, again, it's being able to reach that conclusion and that decision is understanding your self-worth and how you need to control your situation to the best of your ability. And I'm hoping that will help people. And it's not a print book. I had a limited print run when it first came out, and those are all gone now, and I haven't done a second print run. But it is available on Amazon.com, both in Canada, in America, and in Europe. And for international readers, they can download it from a very reliable site called Smashwords. And they carry both of the books that I've published, but one with the Control, and then there's another poetry book, Poetry.
Poetry. I like the poetry. Just say a bit about that before we go, but tell them why poetry with
Okay,
a
so
B.
we were talking a little bit about self-perceptions and perceptions. So I called my book, it's an anthology of poems and verses. So
Okay.
I'm an English literature graduate and marketing, and I wrote multiple poems. I put them together in this book, and I called it Poems and Verses because there's a perception that us as Arabs cannot speak English well.
Okay.
And we can't pronounce the P's or the V's. So that's why I called it Poems and Verses.
Okay, I like the using the the stereotype and shifting it. I like it. Ahmad, thank you, thank you, thank you. What
My
a great
pleasure.
conversation. I hope we'll put the link of the book under. And guys, take the time to read the book because really, you don't have to have sons to read the book. Maybe you need to read the book for yourself, and just there's so many nuggets and wisdom in that book. And connect with Ahmad. We'll put him on. We'll put his link, and thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care.
You
Bye,
too.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.